Would you pay $500,000 for a watch just because it can play a song? Maybe you wouldn't, but Karl-Anthony Towns did. Is it really worth it? Well, that's what we're about to find out in today's video. The story of this watch began at Game 3 of the 2026 NBA Finals.
Towns the rebound off the miss, layup is good.
It wasn't just any game, it was played at Madison Square Garden, marking the Knicks' first appearance since 1999 with a sitting US president in the building. Surprisingly, it pulled in an average of 23.8 million viewers, the largest audience for an NBA Finals Game 3 since 1998. The Spurs actually took this one, 115 to 111, cutting New York series lead to 2-1. But that was a speed bump. The Knicks went on to beat the Spurs 4-1 and win the championship.
The mark, Anunoby the rebound, it's over, it's over!
Ending a 53-year wait that had become one of the longest droughts in professional sports. Still, in the middle of all that noise, Karl-Anthony Towns showed up wearing a Jacob & Co. timepiece built entirely around The Godfather. Timing like that is basically a marketing department's dream. Millions of eyes, one giant stage, and a watch that looks like it belongs in a museum instead of a locker room. So naturally, watch nerds and casual fans started asking the same question. Is this watch actually worth the money, or is it just expensive noise? Well, let's start with a number that made everyone's jaw drop. Did you know the watch Anthony Towns wore is limited to just 88 pieces worldwide and retails for around $360,000? Just pause and let that sink in for a second. Most people use that kind of money to buy a car or make a down payment on a house. Rather, Towns used it to get a single accessory that sits on his wrist. For context, you could buy a very nice home in most American cities, or you could buy this watch and still need a place to live. The choice is yours. Now, before you assume that this is just diamonds slapped on a dial, it's worth knowing this piece is part of a wider opera collection. In fact, prices for pieces in this category typically range between $330,000 and $500,000, depending on materials and complications. Actually, this isn't even the top of the range. Jacob & Co. has released other versions of the same concept, like a diamond set Opera Godfather edition that run well past $1 million. But a price tag alone doesn't explain why people are either obsessed with this watch or completely baffled by it. For that, we need to understand what it actually does. Most watches have one job, tell the time. This one has a second job, and it's basically being a tiny concert hall. Inside sits a music box mechanism using two tilted cylinders covered in steel pins. These pins pluck up miniature comb blades to play The Godfather's infamous main theme. If you press a pusher, it will play a 30-second rendition of one of the most recognizable movie themes ever written, straight from your wrist. Why then are opinions so divided about this masterpiece? Well, let's start with the supporters. This class of people acknowledges that the watch is a genuine feat of micro-engineering by cramming a musical instrument into a case smaller than your palm. On the other hand, critics are saying it's a novelty act wearing a very expensive costume, kind of like a singing fish on the wall, except the fish costs as much as a small apartment. Which side of that argument you land on might depend on the next point, because there's a very personal reason this watch exists at all. As we mentioned earlier, this Jacob & Co. watch was built around the Godfather movie. Actually, The Godfather was the first movie Jacob & Co. founder Jacob Arabo watched in a theatre after arriving in the United States. That's not just a fun fact tossed in for flavour, it's the entire reason this watch exists. In 2019, after lengthy negotiations, Jacob & Co. secured official licensing rights from Paramount Pictures to use the film's name, imagery, story and music. So this isn't some knockoff tribute slapped together for hype. It's an officially sanctioned piece of Godfather history with a tiny hand-painted figure of Don Corleone seated in his chair like he's supervising the whole operation. That backstory matters because it shifts the conversation. Is this a gimmick, or is this one man's love letter to a movie, expressed through mechanical engineering instead of a poster on his wall? Reasonable people can disagree here. But either way, the mechanics behind making that love letter work are seriously complicated. Meanwhile, if you're loving this video, hit the like button and subscribe. Now, if you say this watch was merely a gimmick, then it starts sounding like an insult the watch doesn't deserve. The Jacob & Co. Opera Godfather deserves the accolades because of its features. Underneath all the moving branding sits a hand-wound movement made of 658 individual components. These components are built around a triple-axis flying tourbillon. This is a complication that rotates on 3 separate axes to counter gravity's effect on accuracy. Most watches are lucky to manage one axis. This one juggles three, spinning at different speeds like a tiny mechanical brake dancer that never takes a break. And when the music plays, it's not just the cylinders moving. The entire movement rotates around a central axis. This means the tourbillon, music box, and the little Don Corleone figure all spin together, while the hour and minute dial spins the opposite way just to stay upright and readable. That's an absurd amount of choreography packed into a case barely 49mm wide. Whether or not you think a movie-themed watch is silly, it's hard to call the mechanics inside it lazy. So if the engineering is impressive, why do many watch purists still roll their eyes at brands like this one? The truth is that subtlety has never been this brand's strong suit. Jacob & Co. has built its entire identity on watches most traditional collectors would call too much. Apart from the Godfather edition, there's also an Opera Scarface watch featuring Tony Montana's famous globe. The brand didn't just make one movie watch and stop, it built an entire cinematic universe of them. This is exactly where the brilliant or gimmicky argument gets loudest. Traditional Swiss watchmaking loves elegance and generational subtlety. Jacob & Co. on the other hand is big on spectacle, pop culture, and the kind of design that gets noticed from across a room, or in this case across 23.8 million television screens. Neither approach is wrong, but they're aiming at different audiences. One is trying to impress a watch historian, the other is trying to make an NBA superstar's wrist trend on social media during the finals. Spoiler, it worked. Now, after we talked about the personal story behind the watch, price, engineering, and brand reputation, where do we stand? We guess it's time to actually answer the question instead of dancing around it. Here's our honest take. Calling this watch just a gimmick undersells the engineering. We're talking about a rare triple-axis tourbillon and a functioning music box. These are not easy features to combine in one small case, and very few brands on earth even attempt it. So, if a brand could pull this off, why not give them the flowers and accolades they deserve? But calling it pure genius without acknowledging the theatre of it all ignores the obvious truth. This watch is designed to be seen and talked about first, and then appreciated for its mechanical complexities. It's a flex with a genuinely impressive engine underneath. It's not fair to call it a fraud, but it's obviously not pure high horology either. That's our verdict. The watch is a legitimately complex piece of watchmaking wrapped in a marketing masterpiece. That's why Towns wearing it, during the biggest finals audience in almost 3 decades, made so much sense. Whether you spend $460,000 on it is a completely different question, but calling it just a gimmick is selling the engineers a little short. It seems Towns wasn't the only one turning finals courtside into a watch runway. The world's #1 DJ was sitting in the front row with something on his wrist that turned just as many heads. Want to see what it was? Well, check out our next video, and trust me, this one might make even a $460,000 Godfather watch look modest.